The moment the billionaire's eyes fell on the small silver ring on the Maid hand, his breath caught in his throat.
You look absolutely
For a split
radiant
second,
tonight.
the noise
do
of the
you,
grand
my love.
mansion faded away. The clinking of dishes,
I
the
can't
soft
believe this
footsteps
night
in
is
the
real.
hallway,
It's our
the
dream
quiet
come
hum
true.
of wealth and power. All he could see was that ring. Simple, worn, ordinary to anyone else. But to him, it was a ghost from a life he had buried deep, a life of hunger, cold nights, and promises made in the dark when hope was the only thing he owned. He stood there frozen, his heart pounding like it used to when he was just a poor orphan boy with nothing but torn clothes and big dreams. The maid, unaware of the storm she had just awakened, continued her work, her head lowered, focused on her duties. She had no idea that the man watching her was fighting memories he had tried to forget. Memories of a small girl who once shared her last piece of bread with him, who laughed even when life was cruel, and who held his hand and made him believe that tomorrow could be better. Years ago, in a rundown shelter on the edge of town, two lonely children had made a promise. Not a childish joke, not a silly dream, a real promise. When we grow up, he had said with shaking confidence, I'll become rich, and I'll come back for you. I'll marry you. She had smiled, slipping a cheap little ring onto her finger, telling him it would be their secret, their sign, so they would always find each other again. Life, however, had other plans. They were separated. Records were lost. Names were changed. And the boy who once had nothing became a billionaire who had everything, except the girl he had promised his future to. Now, standing in his own mansion, seeing that same ring on the hand of quiet Maid, his perfect world began to crack. Could it really be her? Or was it just a cruel coincidence playing tricks on his mind? He watched her closely, noticing the way she spoke softly, the way she carried herself with quiet strength, the sadness hidden behind her tired eyes. Something about her felt familiar, painfully familiar, as if his past had quietly walked back into his life wearing uniform and holding a cleaning cloth. The maid felt his gaze and looked up, confused by the strange intensity in his eyes. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and something unspoken passed between them. She felt it too, a strange pull, a feeling she couldn't explain, but neither of them said a word. The air between them grew heavy, filled with questions, secrets, and a promise that refused to stay buried. As the billionaire turned away, his mind raced. Was this the girl from his past? The one he swore he would marry? Or was fate playing a dangerous game with his heart? And more importantly, what would happen if she remembered him too? Because if that ring truly meant what he thought it meant, then this was not just a coincidence. This was a return of a promise that could change both their lives forever. The rest of the day passed in a blur for the billionaire. Meetings, phone calls, and business deals continued as usual, but his mind was no longer in boardrooms or profit charts. It was stuck on a quiet maid and a small silver ring. Every few minutes, his thoughts drifted back to that shelter, to cold floors and thin blankets, to the sound of rain leaking through broken windows. He remembered the girl's laugh, how it made the dark place feel a little warmer, and how she always believed he would become someone important, even when he didn't believe it himself. He tried to convince himself it was impossible. Thousands of people owned simple rings. Years had passed. Faces changed. Lives moved on. But deep down, he knew that ring was not just any ring. It had a tiny scratch on the side, a mark that came from the day it slipped from her hand and rolled across the concrete floor of the shelter. He had picked it up, wiped it clean, and placed it back on her finger with a promise he meant with his whole heart. That scratch was still there. He was almost sure of it. Across the mansion, the maid felt uneasy too. She had noticed the way the billionaire had stared at her hand, at her ring, as if he had seen a ghost. It wasn't the first time someone had asked about it, but never like that. Usually, people barely noticed her at all. She was just another worker, another invisible face in a house full of wealth. But today, his eyes had held something else, shock, pain, and something close to recognition. She touched the ring gently as she cleaned, her fingers tracing its worn edges. That ring was the only thing she had left from her childhood. She didn't remember much about her parents, only that she had grown up in a shelter, moving from place to place, learning early that life was not fair. The ring reminded her of a boy who had once promised her a future. She had waited for him for a long time. Too long. Eventually, she had stopped waiting, but she had never taken the ring off. It felt like letting go of the last piece of hope she had. The billionaire couldn't shake the feeling that fate was standing right in front of him, daring him to face his past. He began asking quiet questions, not directly, but carefully. He asked his staff about the new maid, where she came from, how long she had been working there, what little they knew about her background. The answers were vague. She had no powerful connections, no wealthy family, just a woman trying to survive, working long hours, keeping her head down. That made his heart beat even harder. It matched the life she would have had if she never escaped the cycle of poverty, if she never got the chance he did. Guilt crept in, heavy and uncomfortable. He had promised to come back for her. He had promised to marry her. But life had pulled him away, and success had buried his past under layers of money and status. At the same time, the maid began to feel watched, not in a frightening way, but in a way that made her nervous and curious. She wondered why the powerful owner of the mansion suddenly seemed interested in her presence. She told herself it was nothing, that rich people were strange, that she should just focus on her job. But her heart didn't listen. A strange feeling kept growing inside her, like an old memory trying to wake up. Neither of them was ready to speak the truth. Neither of them was ready to ask the questions that could change everything. The ring sat quietly on her finger, holding secrets from the past. And with every passing hour, the space between who they were and who they used to be grew thinner, as if one small moment could tear it all open. That night, the billionaire found himself unable to sleep. The large bedroom, filled with luxury and silence, felt colder than any shelter he had ever stayed in as a child. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment he saw the ring over and over again. Every memory felt sharper now. The sound of her voice, the way she used to sit beside him on the steps, the promise that had given him strength when he felt completely alone. Success had given him everything. Yet in this moment, he felt like that poor orphan boy again, scared to lose the one thing that once made him believe in love. By morning, he made a quiet decision. He would not confront her directly. Not yet. He needed to be sure. He asked his assistant to look into her background, but in a careful way, without making it obvious. He didn't want rumors. He didn't want her to feel threatened or uncomfortable. Still, part of him felt guilty, as if he was spying on someone who once trusted him with her whole heart. That guilt only made his chest feel heavier. Meanwhile, the maid noticed changes too. The household staff seemed more alert around her. Small things, longer looks, sudden silence when she entered a room, polite smiles that felt forced. She couldn't explain it, but she felt like something big was happening behind her back. It made her nervous. She had worked hard to keep her job, to stay invisible, to avoid trouble. The last thing she wanted was to be pulled into the world of powerful people and their hidden games. One afternoon, she was assigned to clean a room that was rarely used. Inside, she found old boxes stacked neatly, filled with papers, photos, and items from the past. As she dusted, one small photo slipped out of a folder and landed at her feet. She picked it up without thinking. It showed two thin children standing outside a shelter, smiling despite their worn clothes. The boy in the picture looked strangely familiar. Her heart skipped. She stared at the photo longer than she should have, her hands trembling slightly. She quickly placed the photo back where she found it, afraid of being caught. But the image stayed in her mind. The boy's eyes, the shape of his smile. It stirred something deep inside her, something she had tried to bury for years. Could it be the same boy, the one who promised to come back for her? The thought felt too unreal, too painful to believe. She told herself she was imagining things. Rich people had many photos, many pasts. It meant nothing. At the same time, the billionaire received a brief update from his assistant. The information was limited, but one detail stood out. The maid had grown up in a shelter in the same part of the city where he had once lived. The timing matched. The location matched. His hands tightened around his phone. His heart told him what his mind was still afraid to accept. Yet fear held him back. What if she hated him for disappearing? What if she had suffered while he built his empire? What if she didn't want anything to do with the boy who broke his promise? And what if he was wrong, and opening this door only brought pain to someone who didn't deserve it? From two different sides of the same mansion, both of them carried the same silent question. Was fate giving them a second chance, or setting them up for another heartbreak? The ring, the photo, the shared past, they were all pieces of a puzzle that neither of them was brave enough to complete. And with every quiet step through the halls, the truth waited, growing heavier, closer, and harder to ignore. The air inside the mansion grew heavier with every passing day. The billionaire found excuses to be around more often, walking through halls he usually ignored, pausing near doorways just to catch a glimpse of the maid. Each time he saw her, his chest tightened. The ring was always there. The quiet strength in her eyes was always there. And with it, the growing fear that the past was no longer something he could run from. His assistant returned with more fragment of information, never enough to be certain, but enough to make his heart race. Records from the shelter were incomplete. Names were changed. Files were lost in a fire years ago. But the dates, the area, the small details, they all pointed in the same direction. Every piece whispered the same truth. Still, he hesitated. One wrong move could destroy the fragile balance of her life and his own. The maid, on the other hand, felt trapped in a storm she couldn't see but could clearly feel. She noticed the billionaire watching her when he thought no one else was looking, not in a cold or powerful way, but in a way that felt personal, emotional. It made her uncomfortable and curious at the same time. Late at night, she found herself touching the ring, asking silent questions to a past that never answered. Then small moments began to stack up. She overheard staff whispering. She saw doors close when she walked by. Once, she caught a glimpse of her name on a document on a desk before it was quickly covered. Her heart began to pound with fear. Was she in trouble? Had she done something wrong? Or was there something about her that everyone else seemed to know, but she didn't? One evening, the billionaire stood in front of a mirror in his office, staring at his own reflection. He barely recognized the man looking back at him. The power, the suits, the success, it all felt meaningless compared to the promise he had made as a child. He practiced words in his head, imagining what he would say if he finally faced her. Every version sounded wrong. Too late, too selfish, too painful. At the same time, the maid found herself standing in the hallway outside a room she had never been assigned to before. A senior staff member had told her to clean it personally. The door was slightly open. Inside, she saw more boxes, more old files. Something inside her told her this was not a coincidence. Her hand shook as she stepped inside, her eyes scanning shelves filled with memories that did not belong to her, but somehow felt connected to her life. She found another photo, this one clearer. 2 children, the same boy, the same girl. Her breath caught in her throat. The girl in the picture was her. There was no doubt anymore. Her legs felt weak. The past she had locked away was standing right in front of her, printed on glossy paper, hidden in a billionaire's mansion. At that exact moment, footsteps echoed in the hallway. The billionaire was walking toward that very room, his heart pounding, driven by a feeling he could no longer ignore. He felt like fate was pulling him forward, whether he was ready or not. With every step, his mind screamed that this was the moment everything could change. Inside the room, the maid clutched the photo, her mind spinning, her emotions crashing into each other. Shock, fear, hope, anger, and confusion all at once. The promise, the ring, the boy, the man. The footsteps stopped at the door. Neither of them knew what the next few seconds would bring, but both of them felt it. The truth was finally at the door, and there was no turning back. The door handle slowly turned. The maid's heart felt like it would burst out her chest. She quickly slipped the photo back into the folder, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She barely had time to step away when the door opened wider and someone else walked in. It wasn't the billionaire. It was his fiancée. The maid froze, her mind struggling to understand what she was seeing. The elegant woman stood tall in the doorway, perfectly dressed, her eyes sharp and curious. She looked around the room, then at the maid, with a polite but cold smile. The sudden shift in the air was impossible to miss. The maid felt small, out of place, like she had stepped into a world she was never meant to enter. "I was told someone was in here," the fiancé said calmly, her voice smooth but firm. "This room is private." The maid quickly apologized, lowering her head, explaining that she had been sent to clean. The fiancé studied her for a moment longer than necessary. Her eyes drifted to the maid's hand, to the ring. Something changed in her expression. Just for a second, a flicker of surprise, then calculation. The fiancé stepped closer, pretending to adjust her bracelet, but clearly watching the ring. "That's an interesting piece," she said casually. "Not very expensive, but unique. Where did you get it?" The maid hesitated. "It's from my childhood," she answered quietly. "It's just something personal." The fiancé smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She nodded slowly, as if storing the information away. In her mind, alarms were already going off. She had noticed the billionaire's strange behavior, the way he had been distant, the way his focus had shifted. Now, seeing that ring and sensing the tension, she felt a threat she hadn't expected. In the hallway, the billionaire stopped when he saw his fiancée enter the room ahead of him. His chest tightened. He watched from a distance, unseen, as she spoke to Maid. He couldn't hear every word, but he saw the way his fiancée looked at the ring, the way her posture stiffened, the way control returned to her face. A dangerous thought crossed his mind. What if she already knew? What if she was putting the pieces together before he had the courage to speak? The maid left the room moments later, her head spinning. She walked away with the weight of two secrets now pressing on her. Her past with the orphan boy and the sudden attention from a powerful woman who clearly did not like what she saw. Fear wrapped around her chest. She needed answers. But in a mansion full of power, money, and hidden agendas, answers could be dangerous. The fiancée, now alone in the room, quickly searched the desk. She found the same folder, the same old photos. Her breath caught when she saw the image of the two children. The connection was suddenly clear. Her grip tightened on the edge of the desk. "So that's why," she whispered to herself. This was no longer just a maid. This was a ghost from the billionaire's past. A promise he had never truly broken. From that moment on, the stakes changed. The billionaire stood at the end of the hallway, unaware that the truth was no longer just between him and the maid. A third player had entered the game, one with everything to lose and nothing to gain from the past coming back to life. And somewhere between old promises, hidden photos, and a simple silver ring, the future of all three was about to collide in ways none of them were ready for. The tension in the mansion reached a breaking point that evening. The billionaire finally found the courage he had been building for weeks. He walked briskly to the room where the maid had been cleaning earlier, his heart hammering like the drum beats of his childhood nights spent in the shelter. He could see her from across the hallway, holding her cleaning cloth like a shield, unaware of the storm about to hit. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. The maid froze, looking up. There was no mistaking the intensity in his eyes. I know who you are." Her eyes widened. I don't understand," she whispered. He stepped closer, lowering his gaze to her hand. The ring caught the dim light. "This ring," he said softly. "I remember it. I remember you. The promise we made all those years ago. I never forgot." The maid's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced, memories flooding back. The shelter, the laughter, the cold nights, and that impossible promise. It's really you?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Before he could answer, the fiancée appeared in the doorway, her posture cold and unreadable. The billionaire turned, bracing for a confrontation he feared but knew he had to face. This isn't what you think," he began, but she interrupted, her voice calm yet sharp. "I think I understand perfectly," she said, stepping forward, eyes locked on the ring. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" The maid's heart pounded. She realized then that she wasn't just facing her past. She was caught in the center of a presence she had never imagined. The fiancé's expression softened for a fraction of a second, but there was calculation there too, a desire to protect herself, to protect what she thought she had. The billionaire took a deep breath. "Yes, it changes everything, but I can't ignore it anymore. I promised you, and I intend to keep that promise." The fiancée stepped back, her hands trembling slightly. "So all these years, the attention, the sudden interest, it wasn't about me at all," she said, voice cracking. She finally understood the truth. The past had returned in a form she couldn't control. The maid's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as a worker, not as someone powerless, but as the girl who had been promised a future. I never stopped believing," she admitted, "even when I thought you had forgotten." A tense silence filled the room, and then the billionaire gently reached out, taking her hand. "I never forgot. I was lost in a world I thought I needed, but nothing mattered without you." Just as the relief began to settle in, the unexpected happened. The maid's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "If you think you can be happy now, you're wrong. Some promises come with consequences." The three of them froze. The air shifted again, heavier than before. It was clear the past was not finished, and someone or something was still watching, still controlling threads they hadn't yet seen. The billionaire looked at the maid, determination in his eyes. "Whatever this is, we face it together." The maid nodded, clutching the ring, feeling the weight of every memory and every promise. And even the fiancé, silent for the moment, realized that the world she thought she understood had suddenly become a dangerous puzzle with far more at stake than she had imagined. Outside the walls of the mansion, the night was calm, but inside, hearts raced, secrets breathed, and the story, though momentarily resolved, hinted at a shadow waiting just beyond the light. The days that followed were quiet, almost unreal, as if the mansion itself was holding its breath. The billionaire and the maid spent time together, talking to the memories they had shared, the years they had lost, and the promise that had finally brought them back together. Every conversation was filled with laughter and hesitation, tears and relief. It was as if the weight of their past had finally found a place to rest. The ring on her finger became a symbol not just of their promise, but the resilience that had carried them through childhood struggles, poverty, and years of separation. The fiancée, at first distant and cautious, slowly began to understand her place in this story. She realized that love and loyalty cannot be forced or bought, and that the heart often belongs to a truth that no wealth can replace. Over time, she stepped back gracefully, leaving the two of them to navigate the life they had always dreamed of but never dared to hope for. Her departure wasn't bitter. It was a quiet acknowledgement that some stories are meant to return to their original path, and that the past, no matter how complicated, sometimes knows best. As for the maid, she began to settle into a life she never imagined. No longer just a worker in the billionaire's mansion. She felt empowered by the recognition of her worth, her history, and the boy who had grown into the man standing by her side. She kept the ring on her finger, not only as a reminder of promises kept, but also as a symbol of hope, resilience, and the rare beauty of a connection that time and circumstance could not erase. The billionaire, meanwhile, found that his empire and wealth were no longer the measure of his happiness. He had spent so many years chasing success, thinking it could fill the emptiness he carried since childhood. But now, with the girl he had promised, he realized that real fulfillment came from loyalty, love, and keeping promises, even when life made them nearly impossible to keep. His heart, once heavy with guilt and regret, finally felt light, as though a chapter he had long feared was lost had returned in full color. The mansion, which had once felt like a fortress of power and isolation, became a home filled with warmth, laughter, and memories being rewritten. Friends, staff, and even the fiancé came to understand that this wasn't just a story about wealth or social status. It was about humanity, trust, and the courage to face one's past honestly. Every corner of the house seemed to echo with the life they had reclaimed together, reminding them both of what really mattered. Late one evening, the billionaire and the maid sat together in the garden, looking at the stars. "We finally found each other," he said softly, his hand gently holding hers. She smiled, the kind of smile that carried every hardship, every hope, and every promise they had shared. "Yes," she whispered, "and we never have to lose each other again." Outside the mansion, the world went on as usual, but for them, the past had been healed, and the future was theirs to shape. The ring glinted in the moonlight, a quiet testament to love that survived time, trials, and separation. And as they watched the night sky together, they knew that some promises are too strong to ever be broken, and that the heart remembers what the mind sometimes forgets. In the end, the story wasn't just about wealth, power, or missed opportunities. It was about hope, trust, and the extraordinary way life can bring people back to where they belong. And for both of them, that was more than enough.